Welcome to the Zachrilege Cast podcast, YouTube video interview program that features me talking to some of the best and brightest in the atheist slash secular slash awesome community. This is episode number 52. We are recording live on March 31st, 2016. First, I would like to thank my previous guests, No Illusions and Heath Enright, for being on last week. Since our show, they've published approximately 100 hours of content, and I'm sorry that Nathan Deal and Robert De Niro deprived you of content, but you guys get God's Not Dead 2 tomorrow, so the excitement never ends. So tonight, we have Trav Mamone. In addition to being a queer humanist, is the host of the By Any Means blog and podcast, and writes for Free Thought blogs, Queerica, and pretty much everywhere. The podcast is like mine, with interviews and some commentary. And no, I'm not jealous because we spread the awesome on the Zachrilege Cast. And yes, I just refer to my show in the third person. But before we get started, I have to get the out-of-context quotes out of the way. I listen to a lot of Trav content for this show, so I'm getting some of their best, including the following. The homosexuals are going to ruin America, and God was having a bad day. Good evening, Trav. Thanks for being on, and how the heck are you?
Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm doing great. How about you?
Quite good, quite good. I got the beverage going. I can drink for two if I need to. It's all right.
Cool.
By the way, I am jealous because you just posted your interview with David Silverman. You sexy beast, you. So congrats on that.
Thank you.
I know we were talking about that before we recorded. So you like to start your interviews with a question about personal background and kind of religious background. So let's get that going for you.
Sure. Well, I was raised as what I like to call a wedding and funeral Christian. You know, my family and we didn't really go to church except when someone got either married or buried, you know. But even though I wasn't like indoctrinated into the faith, I still knew quite a lot about it, or at least basically the basics of it. You know, my mom gave me one of those, children's Bibles that gave you the basic stories about Noah and Daniel in the lion pit and the resurrection and all that stuff. So I had a semi basic knowledge of Christianity, but I wasn't really exposed to the culture until much later in life. For most of my life, I've struggled with mental illness. I like to tell people that I have a sorry, Uber 47 of the Secular Barbershop for a steel gumbo of mental illnesses, including depression, anxiety, and ADD, and that's a definite wicked combination. So, yeah, I've always had mental health issues, and entering into high school, which is already bad enough, but when you're struggling with mental illness, I was just starting to figure out my sexuality, because I'm bisexual, although at the time I was still kind of confused about it because most of the queer narrative at the time was, focused on gay people. Like, well, I still like girls. But I kind of also like guys as well. So I'm not really quite sure whether I'm really queer enough to come out. And so all these things made high school really difficult for me until I was about 17. I started dating this girl, and she was a Christian. And one night during a really bad depression spell, I basically just broke down and started crying over the phone talking to her. And so then she offered me a lot of comforting words about God and Jesus and Christianity. And so I don't know, it seemed like the right words at the right time. because at the time I was just trying to find anything to help with the pain and the misery that I was feeling. And so at that moment, this whole Jesus thing seemed like the right one. So I became a Christian then. I was like a moderate evangelical for most of my 20s. It wasn't until I it wasn't until like 2010 that things started to change. I started getting involved with progressive Christianity, and so I started really reading like all the liberal, theologians. You're not supposed to read if you're a girl, like Marcus Borg and John Dominic Cross. Well, actually, they're more historians rather than theologians, but Bart Ehrman, that sort of thing. And so I just realized that little by little, um, I started to deconstruct my Christianity. Like first it was like okay, so it's all right to be queer, and if that's true, then hey, guess what, I'm bisexual, everyone. And then I was like, around the same time I was like, okay, so this evolution thing, that's real. God guided it, but evolution does exist. We did in fact evolve from filthy monkey men. Sorry, no illusions. And
Nice.
right. And until finally I just started deconstructing it, and also I was like, okay, so the virgin birth didn't happen, the resurrection probably didn't happen too, because God's not an intervening God, and so for God to come on come to earth as a human, die, and then rise from the dead, that like pretty much breaks every law of science, every natural law imaginable. And so finally to the point where I was like, you know what? I just don't believe in this anymore. One day God just disappeared, So that's the gist of my story. It's kind of long and rambly, I know.
Man, you sucked at being a Christian. Come on. You're asking questions.
Yeah, yeah. I know. Well, I don't know. I've always was a sort of I don't know, I kind of always had this sort of cognitive dissonance. Like, there were little things that just didn't seem to add up. Like, for example, the whole homosexuality question, Um, I could not really find a good reason to say, same-sex love is bad other than, it's in the Bible, Like, people would try to ask me, and I'm trying to think, well, you know what? It really doesn't make sense for God to, condemn two people who love each other simply because they have the same set of genitals. But, then I would say, well, God works in mysterious ways, so I would just sort of leave it alone. And if anybody asked me how I felt about, gay people, like I said, this is before I came out, I would say, oh, well, God loves everyone. We're all sinners, so who am I to judge? That sort of thing. And also, I remember about the whole issue. I never was about that, God put dinosaur fossils into the earth to trick us or some stupid shit like that. Um, so I was like, okay, so where did dinosaurs fit into the story of creation? Did the asteroid destroy the dinosaurs, and then came the Garden of Eden? How's that work? And so, yeah, it seemed like there were red flags right from the beginning, but it took me a while to actually recognize them.
Yeah, I could see that. That's a tough one to get past. This is a question that kind of came to me. I try to write down questions in advance, but things just pop up, and I'm like, I have to ask. Like, when I first realized I was an atheist, it didn't take too long to find other people like me, but were you able to find people who were kind of like role models for you when you came out bisexual and then coming out as genderqueer?
Um, well, Actually, yes. Well, actually, I should back up when you were talking about finding atheist role models. It's funny. A lot of people who were within progressive Christianity that I would meet on Facebook, they became atheists around the same time I did, and so it wasn't like I was completely without, some sort of support. As far as being bisexual and genderqueer, trying to think. I think basically, as far as meeting other bisexuals online, um, I hate to say this, but Tumblr was really instrumental for me for discovering the bisexual community online. I know there are a lot of toxic people on Tumblr. In fact, that's why I don't really use Tumblr much nowadays. But yeah, I just would I don't know, write stuff about bisexuality on my Tumblr page, and tag it bisexuality, and then I just started meeting all these people and started developing a little online group of friends, many of whom I still talk to. And the same thing as far as being genderqueer, because as far as my gender goes, I always felt like, I don't know, I was very androgynous. And I don't mean necessarily just, a femme queer person. I mean, I felt like, me as an individual, not just the way I like to present myself or the way I talk, but just the way I felt inside was pretty androgynous. And so it wasn't until I discovered the word genderqueer, and somebody described it as being, well, some people describe it as being sort of a combination of man and woman. I was like, there's a word for that. And that was another community I found mostly on Tumblr. In fact, a lot of my bisexual friends that I met online also identify as genderqueer.
I guess I could see that. Yeah, that's one of those things. Like people kind of hear the word atheist, but they don't always know what it means until yeah. It's not like people are running out to tell you what these things are, but it's cool that the internet gives you kind of a community at least, or a way to find people. So for you, what was
Hmm.
tougher, coming out atheist, coming out bisexual, coming out genderqueer, or looking at Reddit comments?
Hmm. Well, um, I think the first time I came out was as bisexual, and so that was sort of like that. I remember being really nervous about coming out about, because I mean, my my mom and my stepdad, they're real cool. That stuff doesn't bother them. In fact, my mom used to go with my biological father to gay bars with my paternal uncle, Uncle Frank, because he came out during the 70s, during the height of the gay revolution. And so, they were totally cool with it. But still, it's kind of, I don't know. Still kind of jarring when you're going up to someone and saying, hey, you always thought of me this way. Well, turns out you were wrong, But they were both happy that I came out, and as far as coming out atheist, that was, well, they already knew my theological beliefs were starting to change, and I was having a lot of questions. I, after going to Christian churches for most of my 20s, I started going to a Unitarian Universalist church, which they're pretty much a mixed bag theologically. You can be an atheist and be UU. And so they knew that my theology was changing, and then I think I just happened to just mention it in a passing conversation. I didn't say the word I didn't say the A word because it's taken me a while to really embrace that word, you know. So I just said, you know, oh, I'm a humanist now, you know. And I was thinking, well, since Christmas is coming up and, you know, you don't believe anymore, does this mean we don't have to buy Christmas presents?
And think of it from that angle.
Yeah, right. Well, as far as being genderqueer, I'm not quite sure how I told them, but I don't really know if they really get it because, I mean, they know. I mean, they know that I'm pretty androgynous, but I haven't like told them, you know, I prefer they them pronouns because that'll probably totally confuse them. So yeah, they still call me he, and they know I like to dress and present as you know, effeminate, and sometimes my mom would give me like little tips, whether I'm like, you know, I pick like a really bad nail polish color. So yeah, probably coming out as bisexual first was probably the toughest one. You know, mostly because that was the first time I ever actually said, "Hey, I kind of got something to tell you." After that, the other two became easy.
So do people often get confused and have trouble determining the difference between genderqueer and transgender?
Well, so, depending on who you talk to, some say that genderqueer, as well as any non-binary gender, um, fall under the transgender umbrella because it is you are identifying as something other than what you were assigned as at birth, but being non-binary, it oftentimes means different things to different people. Like a lot of non-binary people I know who were assigned female at birth, they wear binders that flatten their chests and also take testosterone. And as for me, I don't really feel at this time I don't really feel the need to take hormones or have surgery. Not because, you know, I'm against those things. I'm not. I think anyone who needs those things should get those things, should have the proper care. But it's just the way I feel about my own body. It's more like, I don't know, I just feel more comfortable just uh, the way I present myself with my hair and my um, wardrobe. Um, so yeah, and also going back to what you were saying about the difference between transgender and genderqueer. Like I said, the two overlap. Where I think the best way to put it as, you know, folks like, you know, Caitlyn Jenner and Laverne Cox, they're what we like to call binary transgender people. You know, they identify within the gender binary, you know. Whereas, you know, non-binary trans people like me, we don't. We're sort of like a lot of us are kind of like in the middle of the spectrum somehow. Or there are some who identify as agender and don't really identify as any gender at all, you know. Hopefully that makes sense. I don't know. I feel like I'm sort of rambling on tonight.
No, that's a good distinction because I didn't know if there was kind of an intersection in the Venn diagram between the two, and it sounds like there is. And it's one thing to come out and say, here's who I am, but then to be able to have the patience, I appreciate having the patience to explain it. Probably in every interview you've ever done, it's like, oh, you're right. You know, the explanation of that is taking up half the time you're talking. Now, how did you decide I want to get in this podcasting game? Besides the the riches.
Yeah, sure. What riches? Anyways, I actually started podcasting around 2010. This was back when I was a Christian. I had a brief um, podcast centered around like speaking to progressive Christians at the time. Like, I think I gave Rachel Held Evans her first podcast interview ever, and interviewed a couple of others, and it was called Coffee Chats. I think it lasted for just a few months until one of the guys from another Christian podcast, Something Beautiful, emailed me and says, "Hey, we're looking for another co-host. You want to join us?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I was a co-host of Something Beautiful podcast for about a good 2 years, I think, and then I got burned out, and so I thought, okay, my podcasting days are over. Now, fast forward to last year. I started a series on my blog where I would basically have an email interview with, bloggers that I like, and just post that on my blog. Until I asked one of my favorite bloggers, Alex Gabriel. He used to blog at Free Thought Blogs, but now he's at the Orbit. If I could interview him, and he wanted to do a Skype interview, and I didn't really feel like transcribing the audio, so I just, on a whim, just said, I know, I'm just going to make a podcast. And so, yeah, that's how the By Any Means podcast got started. It started as just a twice-a-month show because I didn't think I could really be commit a lot of time to it. But now it has since become a weekly show, and yeah, I just talk to bloggers, writers, podcasters, and activists, all about the intersections of like atheism, secularism, humanism, social justice, and whatever else I want to uh, talk about, And it's actually gotten a lot of good, ever since I started getting more involved with the atheist podcasting community. I've seen it really take off. We take care of our own.
That's true, and we do need people to be on our shows every week. So, but it is good to be a supportive place. Do we say safe space? Are we allowed? Sure, we are. You're not afraid to take on. I know there's certain terms, and as an atheist, some people hear the word atheist and they react like that GIF you shared of Donald Sutherland from Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yeah.
But another word that you get often that you mentioned in an article you did for Free Thought Blogs was, "I'm not a feminist, I'm a humanist." Can you talk about these terms that have become toxic, and how do we discuss them without having to wear a helmet?
Sure. Well, the basis of that particular blog post was, I just don't really get the whole, I'm not a feminist, I'm a humanist, because they're two different things. They intersect, or at least I think they should intersect, but basic definitions are two different things. Like feminism, it's more like, a form of activism that seeks to end patriarchy, sexism, and misogyny, whereas, humanism, I mean, yes, humanism does include human rights, but it's also about, taking a secular approach to life and to morality, and, using facts, reason, and compassion in your daily life. So, yeah, it's more than just, human rights activism. It's a total lifestyle and philosophy. And plus also, it's like what you say about, hearing the word atheist and automatically having this knee-jerk negative reaction. The same thing with the word feminist. I remember I was um, apprehensive about using both terms throughout my life through different points of my life because whenever I would hear either term, I would automatically think of like, the ugly stereotypes. For like feminists, I would always automatically think of like the hairy armpits, the Birkenstocks, the man hating attitude, and the same thing with atheists. I would always think of like, the guy who's always going around saying, oh my God, you believe in a magical man in the sky, you're stupid, just going around ridiculing people just to make himself look smart. And it wasn't until I started to get to know both atheists and feminists and people who identify as both that I really started to hear their stories and hear what they had to say, that I started embracing both feminism and atheism. Unfortunately, it seems as though, even among like really smart, skeptical people, you hear the word atheist and then they automatically assume you're talking about the ugly stereotype. And so I often bring up well, what about, people who think that, atheists are all just like, trolls on the internet who, I don't think all religious people are stupid. That's not true. So why do you think all feminists are this way?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I mean, because of the internet, the negative tends to get more attention. The
Right.
clickbait kind of stuff. So you see these negative stereotypes about atheists, like the worst things that Richard Dawkins ever said, or something, and sometimes it's out of context, and that's what everybody thinks an atheist is, and everybody thinks the feminist is this
Right.
one person who's over there, and you're just like, you can make an entire group of people like that, and it does go bad places. But just to see, and when I hear like a woman say she's not a feminist, it's almost like when I hear a woman say she's like loves Jesus. I'm like, you read the book? Have you read the book? And I mean, maybe things are okay for you, but in general, things aren't great for,
Right.
well, I'd say any minority. And when you check a few of those boxes, and sometimes those boxes don't exist, for most people, it's a tough thing to do. What about social justice warrior? Like when you hear that, what's your reaction?
Well, if somebody calls me a social justice warrior or like starts ranting about social justice warriors, I always have to ask them, well, what does it mean to you? Because some say that I'm not a social justice warrior because I am willing to engage in conversations with people and get them to at least hear what what we mean when we talk about safe spaces and feminism and whatnot, instead of just automatically jumping the gun and jump to conclusions. But on the other hand, I've had some people call me a social justice warrior simply for saying, well, you know what, when it comes to conversations about racism in America, maybe us white people should let black people tell their own stories instead of just jumping in with our opinions about racism in America, So I don't know. I do have a T-shirt that says "Social Justice Warrior," but it's mostly just for shits and giggles.
Oh, I almost want one of those. I do feel like in a way, like I can see like when someone's being ridiculous, point them out on that, and that's fine.
Right.
And maybe some people don't have a sense of humor or can't see what they're doing. But when people are making fun of social justice warriors like a lot, like way too much, I actually think you're actually either are a social this thing you're making fun of, or you're even worse. because you're making fun of people who are just talking about stuff online and not doing anything, and you're like taking that to the next level. It's almost like what religious people call atheism a religion. You're like, well, you're saying we're as bad as you. Okay, it's one of those things, and maybe I'm rambling this time, and I can't ramble. It's your interview, dang it. I have to make a
that's fine,
transition here.
rambling.
This is something that you hold near and dear, and I'm an outsider here, so you're gonna have to steer me. Doctor Who. I actually watched the first episode of the 2005 reboot, I guess. And I need you to talk it up for me, because we're talking like sub Buffy the Vampire Slayer special effects. So tell me about your love for Doctor Who and why I should stick it out, because it's on Amazon Prime now and I can watch the whole thing.
Right. Well, I should say, like, the first couple of seasons of the Doctor Who reboot, the special effects aren't the best, but then again, they weren't really the best in the 70s either. So when I saw the first episode with Christopher Eccleston and Billy Piper, and I saw the cheesy special effects, I thought, oh, this is just like just like in the 70s. So I just thought that's how the show was supposed to be. But the special effects have gotten better. But it's not just about the special effects, it's about the storyline too, I mean, like, I remember when I first saw Doctor Who, it was during a time of transitioning in my life, because I just came out as bisexual. I just started dating my first boyfriend right after I got out of a 6-year relationship with a woman. And so it seemed like at the time my life was, I don't know, kind of in this weird, well, what now kind of stage. And so I just, thought, well, a lot of my friends talk about Doctor Who, so let me just start watching this. And so I got the first season from the library, and I don't know, it just felt like this weird connection. Like I basically felt like I was going on the journey with Rose, from that first episode, Maybe I was sort of like on the same boat as Rose was, She was like started off as the simple girl working at a department store until all of a sudden she meets the doctor, and like her world turns upside down. And that's kind of how I felt,
That's true. The world has turned upside down. I mean, I'll talk about Buffy the Vampire Slayer because I didn't watch it when it first came out, and my wife had to talk me into it. And I watched the first season, and I was kind of like, eh. And then it really kicked into gear in the second season. I don't know if it's a show you actually watched, but it's one that I had to actually record on VHS the final episode and have my wife watch later because she was out of town. And it was a really good run, and so many atheists talk about Star Trek and Doctor Who and sci-fi kind of stuff, and I'm like, well, I gotta try it. I gotta get in here. I want to be cool like the rest of you. I'm trying.
Right. I actually haven't watched an episode of Buffy yet because I missed it too when it first came out. Because during my teenage years, like, I didn't like watching other teenage TV shows at the time because I was like, well, I know high school sucks. Why would I want to watch it on television, But yeah, it's like really gotten popular with my friends, sort of developing this cult following. And plus also it's Joss Whedon, he's the same guy who gave us Firefly, and so being a huge Firefly fan, I was like, oh gee, maybe I should start watching Buffy.
Yeah, you want to borrow that's like the one show that I have the entire series on DVD, so I'm set there. And I'm with you on Firefly. Like I rewatched the series and the movie, and it was different than the first time I watched it because it's going to end, and you get like, oh, what could he have done? Like the movie, I feel like was an entire season of a show, and like what would he have done if he had had like the amount of time he had with Buffy? And it was kind of lucky that he got that. And then even Angel, right. I watched all 5 seasons of that, so I was covered that, a little spinoff. But it's interesting. So so with Doctor Who, it's every season it's a different doctor, right? Is that how it works?
Well, not every single season. The food starts with the Ninth Doctor. It's a continuation from like the old show from the 60s and 70s and 80s. And Christopher Eccleston he plays the Ninth Doctor just for one season because apparently he had a disagreement with the writers of the show. Apparently they, Chris wanted to keep his northern accent, but the producers didn't want him to, so he left after the first season. And so then David Tennant was the 10th Doctor for let's see here, for about 3 seasons, I think. And then he left the show, and then Matt Smith took over as the 11th Doctor, and he was there until, was it 2014, I think? Yeah, and now Peter Capaldi is the most recent Doctor.
Yeah, I don't even know how many seasons. I just remember some TV show that was like the 50th anniversary, and they were showing the older versions. And I'm like, this thing's been on for a while. So I kept asking like people, hey, if I want to start, I'm not watching the show in the 60s. I don't even know. I think they taped over it like in the old days. So they didn't even have that. And it's like, okay, the 2005, you want to start, but you can probably start from other seasons and catch up. So I just want to get my cred. I want to know the secret handshake, next time I go to a conference and be like that.
I don't know if there's a secret Doctor Who handshake, but if you say "allons-y" to somebody and find the person who, like, their eyes light up, that's usually the Doctor Who fan in the group.
Okay, well, that's good to know. So when the Supreme Court made gay marriage legal in the country, I remember Callie Wright of Gay Atheist Manifesto making the following prophecy that transgender bathroom bills would be the next target of bigoted state legislatures. And wow, what a prediction that was. What's it like?
Yeah, Callie Wright's Nostradamus.
Yeah, covering this wave of hatred, and what can we do to combat it?
You know what? That is a good question. What can we do to combat it? Well, I think voting is definitely a good thing, since this is an election year. And I think also, speaking of Callie Wright, here's a little illustration from something I heard on her show, Gay Atheist Manifesto, to illustrate what it means to be a good ally. The first episode of Gay Atheist Manifesto I ever listened to was the one where she was interviewing Seth Andrews, Matt Dillahunty, and Aaron Rao when they were doing the Unholy Trinity Down Under tour. And she got a chance to speak to each of them on the phone. And I think when she was talking to Aaron, he was talking, then he said, so tell me, what's your story? And then Callie started talking about, a little bit about herself and how the show got started. And then Aaron said, what can I do to help? And I'm like, yes, that's exactly what, anyone who wants to be an ally, those are the two things, everyone should be asking, what's your story and how can I help? And, because just because I'm a part of a particular social group doesn't mean I speak for everyone in that group. Like, my story does not reflect the experience of all bisexuals. There are definitely similarities, but even among bisexuals there's diversity, especially among like bisexual women of color. They experience things that I'll never experience. And so have me talk for them, that would be true dishonor to them. So yes, hearing stories is definitely a good start. Saying, what can I do to help? Because then it's like, because you don't want to, like, I don't know, start making assumptions that what's best for a particular group, when you've never walked in their shoes, so it's best. That's basically the best thing I can say as far as being an ally to any group is to listen. I know you're talking specifically about the bathroom bills, but so I know I kind of went off a little bit of a tangent, but it all fits. I think it being voting definitely, and also being an ally, and then also I guess just educating the public too about transgender issues. Like um, you know, I mean, like I said, I wouldn't want, cisgender people to, give trans 101 talks when, trans people are very much capable of giving that trans 101 talk themselves. But yeah, I guess also educating others and also voting, I think would probably be best three things I can come up with. Does any of that make sense? I don't know. I kind of just feel like I'm sort of just rambling on tonight.
I like the rambling Trav. I'm all for it. I think with what happens
Great, cool.
with what's going on in the South, especially, I mean, I live in Georgia. I'm in a weird place because I'm in Atlanta, which is like a blue dot in a red state. So it's like, oh, this stuff
Right.
doesn't affect us. But man, our legislature, well, the thing about the Georgia legislature is they're dumb, but they're copycats. So whatever other states do, they'll copy later. Like Georgia passed their anti-LGBT law, but the governor was like, after the pressure came out nationwide, like Georgia's a really big movie and TV place, and everybody's like, "We're leaving if you guys pass this law." And then the governor's like, "Well, I gotta think about this.
Yeah.
I'm on the border."
Boycott,
The same thing happened in Virginia, and you're close to Virginia, and I'm like, I don't know. Can we break that? Because the South has been big time Democrat, and then they flipped to big time Republican, but it seems like the same bigoted people are in government. And can we get them out and get people who actually want to govern? Because that seems to be something that I don't know. The whole Tea Party thing was like people running for government office who don't like government. Seems like a bad move, personally. But I don't know, the whole idea of just it's a hard thing because I am. It's like other than atheist, I am I'm the oppressor right here. I'm the cisgender male, all that, and it's like, yes, I do want to help, but I don't want to speak for other people. Obviously, that's why I have people on who can tell me what's going on, so I can figure it out and not be
exactly
the oppressor. But yeah, you shared on your By Any Means Facebook page, you shared an interview with Michael Sam. I'm a Missouri graduate, so I'm all about the Michael Sam, story. First openly gay NFL player who didn't quite make it in the NFL. He talked about homophobia in the Black community. So what makes a minority community turn on another minority community?
God, that is like the $1 million question. I think also he said that he experienced a lot of racism in the gay movement too, and I don't know. It's weird, especially because there actually are a lot of there are a lot of queer people of color out there, So I remember God, I don't know who I was talking to. Oh yeah. Person I was interviewing for my podcast. I got to talking about intersectionality and why intersectional activism is important because one of my favorite writers, Audre Lorde, she famously said, "There's no such thing as a single issue struggle because we don't live single issue lives." And so I think I don't know. I think no matter what your group is, there's always uh well, let me put it this way. There was actually a comic strip that I saw online that explains this whole intersectionality thing. It has like a little triangle with blue stripes, and the triangle like gets faces oppression for both being a triangle and having blue stripes. Now, unfortunately, the support group for shapes with don't cover issues facing triangles. Likewise, the triangle support group, they don't mention anything about shapes with blue stripes, and so that's why intersectionality is important, to sort of touch on all these issues and the way that somebody like me as a white bisexual, I still got white privilege, and so there are things that I'll never experience that bisexuals experience every day.
That's true. Everybody has their own struggle, and I don't know if you get to like atheist support groups in your area, but the ones I've gone to in Georgia are still very, as I say, pale and male. And that's just the way it is. And getting
Right.
people out there is tough. And then when they do, you want to support them, but it's definitely another struggle to deal with that community. I mean, Mandisa Thomas, who you interviewed, and I think I listened to that interview on the way home today. She's in Atlanta too, and that is a different thing. The black community is very steeped in the church, and it's hard to get out of that.
Right.
Because it's like you're getting out of the church, but then it's like you're turning your back on who your community is, and people just don't understand that, and you have to deal with that, and it's a tough one. I think that was the thing with Michael Sam. Everybody was thinking, Jackie Robinson, like first black baseball player, was like a Hall of Fame level player. Michael Sam, unfortunately, didn't have the top level skill to be a top level NFL player. So he was on the edge, and then anything that's negative is going to knock you down. And so because he was gay and because he had things happening that were totally out of his control, I think that was part of the reason why he just didn't stick with the NFL. And I think it did affect him personally. Like he struggled. Like he got invited to the Canadian League, and then he pretty much had to quit. I think it was too much. And it's a lot to have all that pressure in your head. I mean, I'm sure you deal with a lot of negativity, and it's like you do a podcast, but people can come after you, and it's probably not easy as well.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I mean, or I should say, fortunately, I haven't had a lot of negative feedback yet. Maybe not, at least not from the podcast. Or at least I don't remember reading anything online, anything negative about the podcast, mostly because I just sort of let the guests speak for themselves instead of like, filling a half hour to an hour every week with, what I have to say. I had some pushback on a few articles that I wrote. As far as like actual pushback for being queer, that's mostly in like the comment section of like Reddit and YouTube. Like I remember like a lot of times, I don't know, sometimes on Reddit, even on like Reddit's humanism forum, I mention my pronouns are they, them, their, and it gets like, and just that little correction gets downvoted to like -15. It's like well, gee, I don't think you're doing this whole humanism thing right. If you just automatically dismiss what I have to say because you think that I just found a made up gender on Tumblr and decided to roll with it to be a special snowflake. So Yeah.
Well, can you talk about the pronoun and when you decided to choose it and why it's important for people to recognize that?
Oh yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah. I go by they, them, their pronouns. There's not really any other pronouns in the English language that are gender neutral except it, but it, if you call a person an it, it's very dehumanizing, especially trans people. And so the only thing we have left is the singular version of they, which people use a lot, they just don't realize it. Um, you know, hey, there's a phone call for you. Tell them I'll call them back later, that sort of thing. Um, yeah, a lot of people kind of, even a lot of my close friends get confused by the they them pronouns, but they at least try. And when I do correct them, they kind of just freak out and go, "Oh, sorry, I'm so sorry." I'm like, "No, no, no, you're fine, you're fine. If it's an accidental misgendering or mispronouncing, I don't mind. It's not until it's deliberate. If you say, screw you, you have a penis, you're a guy, you're a he, get over it. That's where I draw the line.
Yeah, I can see that. Don't let that happen. Don't do that, people. But yeah, that was
Right.
when who was on? Was it you or was it Ari who was on NRR and Ashley just kept saying he just couldn't stop. And they kept
Oh yeah, yeah.
kept like fixing it, but yeah. So you taught me a new acronym that I can unhear. TERF. What is this?
Oh God, TERF. Yeah, TERF. That stands for Radical Feminist. And TERFs are nasty, nasty extremists. They are to trans people what the Westboro Baptist Church is to gay people. Except TERFs are mostly secular. You know, TERFs believe that trans women are really men in dresses, and that they're trying to present themselves as women so they can infiltrate spaces, uh, dedic, you know, uh, you know, specifically designated. There he goes, trying to get the word out. Designated for women in order to hurt women. And there's this like one uh, website. It's called Gender Identity Watch, where they will post pictures of trans women and say and call them, he, and say and reveal their real names, and or not real names, I should say dead names, the names that appear on that were, on their birth certificates, and say where they work and all this nasty stuff. And they are just like the scum of the earth.
Yeah, when you get down to it, there's some really bad people on the internet, and it seems like on the internet people just get to say whatever they want and get away with it, as long as they're extreme.
Right.
People are, I don't know, there are people who are afraid to insult people, and the people who just don't give a fuck. Totally, there is a to know
Right.
give. But I feel like I cannot complete this interview without asking something of you that has not been asked in the interviews that I have heard. Talk about your love of beer. Like, do you have
Yes.
a certain style, or there's some breweries around you because you're like in the somewhat Baltimore-ish Maryland area?
Yeah, yeah. Well, in Delaware, there's Dogfish Head. They make really good IPAs. The 60 minute is good. The 90 minute is the best, though. However, I guess because since it's such top quality IPA, you can only they only sell the 90-minute in 4-packs instead of 6-packs.
Yeah.
And then they also have a 120-minute pack, but it's usually like $10 per bottle. And so that's got to be some real good stuff there. I never had the 120-minute because I can't afford it. But
It's pretty
yes,
rare,
Dogfish
yeah,
Head.
that one.
Oh yeah, definitely. And also like Flying Dog, they have some good IPAs as well. Raging Bitch is good, and they also have Flying Dog. That's a good IPA as well. I'll tell you this one beer that I really like that I only get occasionally. It's brewed by Dewclaw, which is in Glen Burnie, which is closer to Baltimore than where I am. It's called Sweet Baby Jesus, and you might have seen this
That is
online.
one
It's
I
like
want to. I mean, we might have to do a trade because that is one that in Baltimore that I've heard. Because that is isn't it a peanut butter chocolate stout or is it just peanut butter?
it's a chocolate and peanut butter. And it is like amazing. Although it's definitely an acquired taste, but I don't know. Think of it as sort of like, I don't know, a peanut butter and chocolate milkshake for grown-ups. That's the best way I can describe it.
Yeah, there's one Terrapin, which is in Athens, about an hour from here. They do one called Liquid Bliss, and that's a peanut butter chocolate stout. I like the dark
Oh,
beers.
wow.
Like I like brown ales, nut ales, and then like stouts and like quads, Belgian quads. Those things are pretty strong. Heavy Seas, which is pretty close to you. They have like a quad and they have a stout that's like brewed with chocolate and bourbon barrels. Anything with bourbon
Oh, wow.
barrels or any kind of alcohol barrels, watch out. That's some strong stuff. But yeah, I'm pretty much a beer crazy guy. Right there over there, there is a closet full of beer. I get my beer out of the closet, right? But it's good to hear a
Cool.
fellow beerophobe, not beerophobe. What's the opposite? Beer lover. Because when I was in
Yeah, beer aficionado, I guess.
Reason Con, I was like, I'm gonna bring a bunch of beer and I'm gonna like share beer with people and end up drinking it all myself. That's the way it goes. But I'm hoping that Reason Con does come back next year, and I'm hoping whatever law North Carolina has gets booted. But I've heard that people are already volunteering to kind of watch the bathrooms in that case. So that's good. It's good to have some help, some love. But the love needs to go your way, Trav. Where can people find you? Like you have this massive online presence, and people need to read your stuff and follow your podcast and all that.
Sure. Well, they can read the blog at freethoughtblogs.com/byanymeans, and that's by spelled B-I. And they can subscribe to the podcast through iTunes, Spreaker, and Stitcher. And you can follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/byanymeanspodcasts. And on Twitter, I'm at T Mamone.
Yeah, if there's something I'm secondly obsessed with besides beer, that would be interviews. And Trav does really good interviews and expands my horizons. And now I'm going to go after all the people you've talked to. So we're going to have all the same interviews. So ha. But it's good because I'm sure we'll ask different questions because that's how it goes. But if you want to support this show, you can be like Bobby, Hugh, and Teody, Men of Distinction, and support me on patreon.com/Zachrilege, Zachrilege, and I just have to spell my name because I have bad marketing skills, and I can still do that after drinking a beer. So follow me on Twitter, Zachrilege, like the Zachrilege Cast page on Facebook. Send all hate mail to zachrilege.cast@gmail.com. I would like to thank Trev for being on tonight. Everybody stay safe. If you need to chat, I'm available. If you're an atheist and feel alone, you are not alone. Reach out. Let's chat and get some of that human connectiveness. It keeps people coming back every Sunday. Stay skeptical, and I love all of y'all.